Hey guys, it's Alex. This is one that I've been thinking of for a while, and I wanted to show you guys my 5 oldest books. These aren't incredibly old in the collecting antiques sense. These are just old for someone who normally buys books at thrift stores and gets books that are, within the last 20 years. But I really like old books. They always seem to have much more of a character than new books do. Like, they have a history. So I wanted to share mine with you guys. Not all of the dates on these are exact. Some of these books only include the original copyright date and not the actual publication date of that edition. So I've had to estimate and do outside research, and for some of these books there is a year range of when I think it could be published. I'm not going to go into depth on how I figured out the date for each one because I'm not a professional. I don't know what I'm doing and I could possibly be wrong about some of these, but I just wanted to let you know that this isn't perfectly exact, it's just the best estimation that I have for these books. The first book on this list is Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson. This copy was published in 1947. It belonged to my father, and it's curious that it was published a good deal before my father was even born. It's also one of the few that has its original dust jacket still mostly intact, although it is worn quite a bit. I haven't actually read Treasure Island, and when I do, I probably won't be reading this edition, just because the dust jacket is still so fragile and I don't want to ruin it any more than it is. But it's nice to have an old edition of this book. The illustrations on the end pages are absolutely beautiful, and the dust jacket itself has a lovely piratey design on it that's just absolutely gorgeous. This book is also illustrated, and it's one that I love to just carefully flip through on occasion to look at all the beautiful illustrations. They're very sketchy and dark, and I love them. I think this is a very beautiful book. The next book on my list is Little Men by Louisa May Alcott. This edition is from somewhere between 1940 and 1947. The copyright date inside says 1940, but it doesn't have a specific publication date for this edition. The dust jacket on this is a little more beat up and a little bit more falling apart. I have to be very careful with it because it's very thin paper, it's very old, and tears quite easily. The illustrations on the end pages are also quite gorgeous. I really love them, and you can see that there's an inscription on this one that's in some kind of cursive that I can't read, but it does say 1947. This is also a copy that I have not and probably won't ever read, just because it seems so fragile. Some of the pages inside are a little bit loose, so this is one I worry about touching too much, but it's also one that I haven't read, and I do plan to at some point, even if it's not this specific copy. Next, I have Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain. This was published in 1940. It has beautiful red end pages, and unlike the others, this book actually seems to be in fairly decent shape. So when I do decide to read some Mark Twain, I think this is a book that I could realistically pick up. It doesn't have an inscription on the inside, so I don't know whose it was or where I got it from, but I do believe I collected it from some of my grandparents when they passed away, because most of their books came into my possession as I am the reader in the family, so that seems like a fairly safe bet. The next book on this list is the one I'm most excited about and most proud to own, and that is The Password to Larkspur Lane by Carolyn Keene. This book was published sometime between 1939 and 1941. The only date on the inside is the original copyright date, which was in 1933, so I can't narrow it down further than those 2 years. But I absolutely love Nancy Drew and those old middle grade mysteries, and the fact that I own one that was published possibly in the 30s, but is very exciting to me. This book belonged to my grandfather. It was given to him when he was 10 years old, and it's been passed down to me. I actually still have the bits of the dust jacket that have survived, but they're no longer connected in a single cover. They're just hidden on the inside so that they don't fall apart even further. But it's really lovely to see the original cover of this book. This is actually a Nancy Drew book that I don't know if I've read, because I have read a number of them, but I haven't always tracked which ones I've read, and I don't particularly remember this one. So when I do get around to finally reading this book, I'm definitely going to be reading this copy. One thing that's also cool about this book is that my grandfather doodled his name all over the inside. And it's very neat to see that my 10-year-old grandfather, who I never met, just drew all over it, saying that it's his book, which is very indicative of a 10-year-old, I think. I'm sure I did this with a number of my books. The final book on this list, and the oldest book on this list, is The Mystery of the Four Fingers by Fred M. White. This was published in 1908, and I do actually know for a fact that this copy was printed in 1908, because it does say so on the inside. It's not a first edition, because I have checked. Not that it would matter if it was a first edition, because I don't think this is a very famous or well-known book. I really only own it because it was passed down to me, and there's no way that I'm going to get rid of a book that's over 100 years old. I know incredibly little about this actual book, but it's in surprisingly decent condition. None of the pages look like they're falling out, and this was also a library copy of some kind. It does say Recreation Reading Room on the inside. It has that stamped on the inside, so it did belong to some sort of collection before my maternal step-grandfather collected it and then handed it down to me. Apart from the pages being a bit yellowed and fragile, this book is in surprisingly great condition, although it has absolutely no dust jacket. I'm sure this wasn't the most interesting video to some people if you're not interested in looking at old books, or if you actually know a lot about old books so that these aren't that old or interesting to you, but I'm always excited. I have a whole shelf of books I own that are fairly old, at least like 50 years old or older, and I enjoy having them there. I have a number of books that were printed in the 50s and 60s as well, but they weren't quite old enough to make this list. Let me know down below what are some of the old books that you guys own, if you own any old books, because I know not everyone wants to. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys again soon.